God's chosen ones. 7 signs that indicate you are the most powerful chosen one. You're the most powerful one. She never wanted to stand out. She would have given anything to just blend in, to laugh at what others laughed at, to believe what others believed. But something in her spirit wouldn't let her follow the crowd. While other girls chased popularity or comfort, she carried questions. Heavy ones, quiet ones, like bricks in her chest. Why am I like this? Why does everything feel like a test I didn't sign up for? Why do I sense things no one else sees? And yet, despite the storms, despite the silence, she never folded. She didn't cheat the pain. She didn't run from the fire. She didn't fake the smile. She just kept going, with no audience, no applause, just grit. Just God. They thought she was sensitive, emotional, too intense. But heaven called her something else. Chose not for ease, but for endurance. Not for comfort, but for calling. If you've ever walked through hell with holy fire still burning in your chest, if you've ever felt the weight of the world on your back and still chose to be kind, if you've ever whispered to God, please tell me this pain has a purpose, then keep listening, because what felt like punishment was actually preparation. This message, it was written in heaven with your name on it. The silence she survived. She didn't remember the moment she became strong. There was no applause, no turning point, just silence. It started in the little things. People stopped checking in. Friends who once laughed with her began to fade. And every time she spoke from her soul, someone told her she was too much. So she began keeping things to herself. The dreams, the pain, the spiritual nudges she couldn't explain. She learned how to cry quietly, how to pray with cracked lips, how to smile while bleeding. No one saw the battles, but heaven did. Her name is Eliana, but you might know her as yourself. She was the one people always came to for prayer, for encouragement, for answers. Yet when it was her turn to break, no one noticed. She was too good at pretending she was fine, too good at surviving with grace. But grace, as she would come to learn, was never supposed to be pretty. It was supposed to be powerful. There were days she could barely get out of bed. Days she'd sit on the floor of her kitchen whispering, God, if this is all there is, take the ache out of my chest. But the ache never left. Not at first. Instead, it taught her something holy. The world told her, be louder. God whispered, be still. The world said, move on. He said, stay with me. There was no lightning bolt moment, no prophet in the hallway. Just the silence, long, cold, unfair, but also sacred, because it was in that silence where her real strength was born. Not the kind of strength that shouts in public, the kind that kneels in private, the kind that keeps showing up for others while nobody shows up for you. That was the beginning of her knowing that she wasn't just different. She was divinely different. The reason her life had felt like a test wasn't because she was cursed, but because she was called. She didn't know it then, but she was passing exams most people didn't even realize they were taking. When she chose not to respond in anger, when she stayed faithful while others walked away, when she forgave what no one ever apologized for, she wasn't being weak. She was becoming unstoppable. Heaven was taking note. You see, the most powerful chosen ones don't always look powerful. They look tired. They look quiet. They look like the ones who walk into a room and feel everything before anyone says a word. They carry peace that disturbs demons and kindness that breaks curses. They don't know why they feel so different, only that they can't unfeel it. But let me tell you something. That difference isn't a defect. It's a divine assignment. Eliana didn't know she was a prophet in disguise, a healer with no title, a warrior clothed in tenderness. She only knew that she could no longer ignore the signs, the recurring dreams, the unexplained clarity, the way people would pour their hearts out to her in the grocery store like she was some kind of spiritual lighthouse. And when she asked God, "Why am I like this?" He didn't scold her. He simply said, "Because I needed someone who wouldn't fold under fire, someone who could carry this level of light without losing their mind in the darkness." So she stopped running. She stopped shrinking. She stopped apologizing for being sensitive, spiritual, and set apart. And maybe today, as you're listening to this, you're starting to realize you are Eliana. You've been walking through fire with no one clapping. You've been pouring into others with no one pouring into you. You've been carrying a calling you can't explain and surviving a silence that should have broken you. But it didn't, because God didn't choose you to be understood. He chose you to be anointed, to be one of the few who rise without applause, to be the lighthouse, to be the remnant, to be the proof that quiet strength is still strength, and that pain without praise is still part of God's plan. So if you've been waiting for someone to see you, if you've been holding your breath hoping someone would say, "You're not crazy, you're called," this is that moment. This is your confirmation. This is the message heaven wrote with your name on it. And in the next chapters, you'll discover the 7 signs that confirm what your spirit has always suspected. You were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand apart. You are not just a chosen one. You are one of the most powerful God ever called. 601. The voice inside you never doubted. She was 9 years old the first time she heard it. Not from a pulpit, not from her parents, not from a dream. From somewhere deeper. A whisper that didn't use words, but spoke straight to her bones. The other kids in Sunday school were coloring pictures of Noah's Ark. She was staring out the window, sensing something was coming, something she couldn't name, but already believed in. It wasn't fear, it was familiarity. It was like the wind had a message just for her. And though she couldn't explain it, she felt chosen, long before anyone called her special. All through her childhood, she sensed things others dismissed. She knew when people were lying, even with a smile. She knew when someone was about to leave, even before the goodbye. She knew when to walk away, even if it meant walking alone. The world called it intuition. But now, looking back, she knows it was God's voice, hidden in her knowing. There's a sacred kind of wisdom that doesn't come from books, church pews, or age. It comes from the Spirit. A divine compass planted deep inside the ones he calls early. And if you've ever had that sense, that knowing that couldn't be reasoned away, that conviction that stirred in your belly before your mind could catch up, then you too carry this sign. You didn't just figure it out, you were downloaded. This voice doesn't scream, it whispers, and it always asks the same question. Will you trust me, even when you don't have proof? When Eliana was 25, she stood in front of a church altar with a man everyone said was perfect, but something in her spirit screamed no. Not out loud, but loud enough to make her hands shake. She married him anyway, and spent the next 5 years in a spiritual prison, smiling in public, sobbing in secret. Until one day she said yes to the voice she once ignored. She packed her things, left without a plan, and peace met her at the door. Not comfort, not clarity, just peace. And she learned something heaven has been trying to teach her since she was a little girl. When you obey that inner voice, you don't get all the answers. You just get God, and that's always enough. People called her brave, but bravery had nothing to do with it. She just knew. And once you've felt that sacred knowing, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. You can't explain it to people who live by logic. You just live by it. And every time you trust it, even when it leads you through fire, you find yourself in rooms you never imagined, with doors you never had to knock on. That's what happens to those who carry this first sign. You don't just hear God. You recognize Him even when He sounds like silence, even when He shows up as a dream you forgot, a number that keeps repeating, a stranger who says something they couldn't possibly know. You don't question if He's real. You question how to explain Him to people who've never heard Him the way you have. So if you've ever sensed something before it happened, if you've ever walked away from something that looked perfect but felt wrong, if you've ever obeyed the whisper and found favor waiting on the other side, that's not intuition. That's an anointing. That's your first sign. You possess an unshakable inner knowing, not because you're better, not because you're lucky, but because you were called early and marked before you even knew your own name. Scripture to close. The Spirit Himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Romans 8:16, Sing 2, drawn to the quiet. She used to think something was wrong with her. Why did she always prefer the silence over the noise? Why did crowded rooms make her feel smaller, not seen? Why did she breathe easier the moment she left the party? She wasn't shy, she wasn't antisocial. She was spiritually sensitive, and no one had ever told her that was holy. There's a strange ache in the life of the chosen, the ache for quiet, not because you want to be alone, but because your soul has learned where God tends to speak the loudest. It's never in the applause. It's in the stillness. It's in the room where the lights are low, the phone is face down, and the only voice you hear is His. And Eliana never used to understand why her spirit would get restless in certain conversations, why laughter would feel forced in certain circles, why she'd feel more herself taking a walk alone than in rooms where everyone was trying to impress one another. Now she knows. That discomfort wasn't awkwardness, it was discernment. And that pull towards solitude, it wasn't avoidance. It was God drawing her inward so He could speak upward. The world chases visibility, but heaven whispers in obscurity. In her late 30s, Eliana started waking up at 3:17 a.m., not once or twice, but night after night. Always at the same time. She'd stare at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with her, until one night she sat up and whispered, "God, what is it?" And for the first time in what felt like years, she felt peace. Not an answer, not a revelation, just a deep, calming peace that said, "I missed this. I missed you." And that's when she realized, all her life she'd been called to the quiet, because the quiet wasn't her weakness, it was her assignment. Chosen ones carry a frequency the world doesn't understand. They are tuned to heaven, not to hype. Their souls grow in silence, not in spotlight. That's why you've always felt most alive in nature. That's why long drives with no music feel like therapy. That's why you crave mornings before the world wakes up. That's why your best conversations with God never needed words. You're not weird. You're wired for wonder. You weren't meant to be the loudest voice in the room. You were meant to carry presence, the kind that speaks before you do. And that's why you're being drawn into seasons where your phone rings less. Your invitations slow down. Your circle shrinks. That's not punishment. It's purification. God doesn't hide you because you're unworthy. He hides you because he's getting ready to reveal you. But before he uses your voice to reach the world, he teaches you to hear his in the quiet. So if you've been pulled into stillness lately, if people misunderstand your silence, if you crave peace more than people, if you're waking up early with no explanation, you carry this second sign. You are drawn to solitude, not because you're avoiding the world, but because heaven is drawing you closer. The scripture to close. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 5:16, Sing 3. The fire didn't burn you, it built you. She didn't know it was a test until she walked through it and realized she hadn't been destroyed. There were no warnings, no divine instructions, just a storm that hit harder than she thought she could survive. The betrayal came first, not from an enemy, but from someone she trusted with her deepest prayers. Then came the silence, the closed doors, the health scare, the financial drought, the friends who grew distant, the church that grew quiet, and the nights, oh, the nights. Nights when she screamed into her pillow so her children wouldn't hear. Nights when she begged God to take the ache out of her chest. Nights when her heart beat so hard she thought, maybe this is how I go. But she didn't. She rose. No one knew what she was carrying. She still smiled at work, still showed up for others, still led Bible study. She looked fine, but fire doesn't always leave visible burns. This is the hidden curriculum of the chosen. You will be tested by fire, and no one will know you're burning. But you will pass, not because you're stronger than others, but because you've been anointed to survive what others couldn't. They thought the losses would break you, but God used them to build you. You didn't just walk through the fire. You absorbed it and became something it could no longer touch. Like gold refined, like steel forged. And now you carry a weight in the spirit that only comes from pain endured in private. When Eliana finally got through it, the heartbreak, the legal battles, the loneliness that nearly ate her whole, she didn't emerge bitter. She emerged different, quieter, wiser, sharper. Not as loud in her faith, but deeper. Not as quick to shout, but quicker to discern. And those who used to dismiss her, they started asking her for advice, for prayers, for insight. Because people can feel when someone has walked through fire and lived. You didn't survive by luck. You passed the test by faith. Faith that stayed even when God felt silent. Faith that whispered, "He's still with me," when everything said he wasn't. Faith that refused to fold, even when folding would have been easier. If you've been through a season where nothing made sense, if you've cried alone but still chose not to curse God, if you've walked away from what hurt you, even when you had no backup plan, if you've had to heal without an apology, then this is your sign. You faced the fire, and you didn't just survive, you transformed. Don't let the world tell you this pain was pointless. It was your promotion. The fire wasn't sent to expose your weakness. It was sent to reveal your strength. And you carry it now, not in your voice, not in your title, not in your status, but in your spirit. The ones God trusts most, he tests hardest. And if your life has felt like a furnace lately, remember this. You're not being punished. You're being prepared for purpose, for authority, for impact. You're not ashes, you're oil. Scripture to close. Where you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Isaiah 43:2. People felt you before they understood you. She could always feel it in the room. Before anyone said a word, before the handshake, before the small talk, something would shift when she walked in. Eyes would glance, energy would stir. People would either lean in or pull back. She used to think it was in her outfit, her posture, her tone, but it wasn't. It was her presence. You don't have to speak to shift a room when God walks in with you. Chosen ones carry weight, not on their shoulders, but in their spirit. And the truth is, people felt her long before they understood her. Some were drawn to her and didn't know why. Some avoided her and didn't know why. Some admired her but couldn't articulate it. Some envied her and didn't understand the fire behind their resentment. And none of it had anything to do with popularity. It's spiritual. Eliana learned slowly that light makes people respond, not because of who she was, but because of what she carried. Her presence became a mirror, and when people stood in front of it, they were forced to see themselves. Some saw beauty and felt safe. Some saw insecurity and tried to compete. Some saw peace and were drawn to it. Some saw truth, and it scared them. The more she healed, the more intense it became. Strangers would open up to her in elevators. Children would run to her without knowing her name. People would say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," and then pour out their whole story, because their souls recognized hers, even when their mouths didn't. The chosen carry this fourth sign. You have a magnetic presence, one that stirs what people haven't yet dealt with in themselves. It's not charm, it's not charisma, it's consecration. You've been through so much fire. Your presence now carries oil. And that oil does two things. It heals the hungry, and it disturbs the unready. You don't have to preach to carry power. You don't need a title to walk in authority. All you have to do is walk in a room, and the Spirit will announce you before you speak. That's what it means to be marked. That's what it means to be chosen. Eliana used to apologize for being too much. Now she smiles quietly and lets the Spirit do the talking. She's not here to prove herself. She's here to be herself, and that's more than enough. So if people have misunderstood you, if you've been told there's just something about you, if others have loved you deeply or avoided you completely and you've never been able to explain why, you carry this sign. Your presence is sacred. It disrupts darkness. It draws the hungry, and it carries heaven's fingerprint. Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:16. Still were drawn to quiet, because God was loud there. She never liked noise for the sake of noise. Even as a child, she would wander off from birthday parties, find a quiet hallway, and sit with her thoughts. Not because she was sad, not because she felt left out, but because she felt full. There, it was like she could hear heaven better when the world got quiet. As she got older, the noise changed. It wasn't just playground laughter anymore. It was performance, pressure, pretending. The rooms got louder, but her soul kept craving quiet. People called her reserved. Some said she was too intense, too sensitive, too deep. But what they didn't understand is this. She wasn't hiding. She was hearing. Some people pray in churches. Others meet God in choirs. Oh, real. But Eliana, she found him on walks no one noticed, in the quiet space between inhale and exhale, in the places where the phone didn't ring and the expectations didn't follow. You see, chosen ones aren't just drawn to quiet. They require it. Not because they're avoiding life, but because life becomes clearer in the stillness. Quiet is where the Spirit trains them, where clarity comes without a second voice, where peace settles like dust, covering every scar, every lie, every label they once believed about themselves. There was a season Eliana thought God had gone silent. Her prayers hit the ceiling. Her journal went unanswered. Her soul felt like a locked door with no key. But one night, sitting alone on her back porch, she didn't ask for anything. She just listened. And in that silence, God didn't shout. He rested. He wrapped her in the kind of stillness that speaks without sound. That's when she realized God doesn't always speak to be heard. Sometimes he speaks to be felt. The world keeps saying, hustle. Heaven keeps saying, be still. This is why you've felt a holy discomfort in loud crowds. Why you crave mornings before the world wakes up. Why you sometimes sit in your car after pulling into the driveway, not to avoid home, but to finish your conversation with God. It's because your spirit was designed to discern, not just to do. And the more you slow down, the more clearly you hear. This is the way. Walk in it. Chosen ones understand. Stillness is an absence. It's presence without pressure. In the quiet, God does surgery. He untangles lies. He rewires thoughts. He whispers identity. So if you've been misunderstood for needing space, if your soul pulls you to nature, to silence, to long drives with no music, if you've ever felt closer to God in a quiet room than in a crowded sanctuary, that's not strangeness. That's spiritual sensitivity. You carry this fifth sign. You're drawn to quiet because God is loud there. And every time you return to that sacred stillness, heaven speaks again. Not with thunder, but with peace. Scripture to close. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15, 6:6. You carried a mission you couldn't explain. She didn't know when the mission began. There was no grand announcement, no angel in the mirror, no burning bush. Just a quiet ache that never went away. An ache that whispered, there's more to you than this. Not in a prideful way, in a prophetic one. While others planned 5-year goals, Eliana prayed over burdens she couldn't name. While friends dreamed of promotions, she longed to build healing centers, fund missions, rescue girls, break generational curses. And she couldn't explain why. She just knew. From the outside, she looked like anyone else. But inside, she was carrying something sacred, and it didn't have a label. Not yet. She wasn't looking for fame. She was looking for impact. But how do you explain that to people who only understand titles? How do you say, I feel called to something, but I don't know what to call it yet? You don't. So she stayed silent, smiled politely, and kept showing up, even when the why felt blurry. That's what makes chosen ones different. They don't move from ambition. They move from assignment. God doesn't always give you the plan. Sometimes. He just gives you a burden and waits to see if you'll carry it in the dark. Eliana carried it through underpaid jobs, through invisible seasons, through closed doors that made no sense, and through open ones she didn't ask for. And every time she questioned the path, something in her spirit said, you were never walking in circles. You were walking in obedience. That's the sixth sign. You are guided by a mission you can't always explain. You're not chasing clout. You're chasing clarity. And that's why certain jobs felt unbearable. Why surface-level friendships exhausted you. Why you felt grief when others felt joy, because something inside you knew. This isn't it. This isn't what I was born for. You've always sensed it, haven't you? That there's a reason God protected you. That there's a reason you were drawn to things others laughed at. Like healing, like intercession, like justice, like freedom. Your soul came here on assignment. And every delay, every disappointment, they weren't signs to quit. They were tests of trust. You don't need everyone to understand the calling. They weren't on the mountain when God whispered your name. You just need to keep walking, even when the road looks wild, even when you don't have the title, even when the fruit isn't visible yet. Because when the moment comes, when God reveals what you've been carrying, it will make perfect sense why your life felt different all along. This is the truth. You don't carry ordinary dreams, because your mission isn't ordinary. It's divinely designed to unlock what others are still praying for. And when your obedience collides with divine timing, nothing and no one can stop what heaven has written. So if you've ever cried because you couldn't find words for what you carry, if you've ever watched others succeed while you wait in hiddenness, if you've ever prayed, God, give me the courage to walk this out, even if I walk alone, you are one of the powerful chosen. And your burden? It's not a weight. It's a map to destiny. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah 1:5. See what others call crazy. She stopped explaining her dreams a long time ago. Not because they stopped, but because people didn't understand them. She'd see things in her spirit before they happened. She'd have dreams so vivid they made her journal pages shake. She'd feel someone's pain before they spoke a word. She'd walk into a room and sense tension no one admitted. She saw patterns, cycles, warnings disguised as coincidences, messages hidden in numbers, music, timing. But when she tried to explain, they called her too deep, too intense, too much. So she smiled and stayed quiet. But God wasn't quiet. He was loud in her spirit, louder than ever. And the more she tuned in, the clearer it all became. She wasn't delusional. She was discerning. This is the mystery of the chosen. You see in spirit what others can't see in the natural. And because you see differently, you walk differently. You pray differently. You choose differently. You love differently. You leave differently, not out of pride, out of purpose. Eliana remembered the day she walked out of a deal that would have made her money, but felt off in her gut. Everyone thought she was crazy. But months later, the scandal broke. And she wept, not because she was right, but because she heard. She saw, and for the first time, she didn't apologize for the gift. She thanked God for it. That's the seventh sign. You see the bigger picture, the divine tapestry, when others only see the moment. And that ability? It's not imagination, it's insight. You see beyond the surface. Where others see coincidence, you see confirmation. Where others get distracted by crisis, you see the lesson. Where others get stuck in cycles, you see exit signs that only revelation can reveal. You're the one people come to for guidance, even when they don't understand why they trust you. You're the one who can feel God in a conversation, in a detour, in a dream at 3:17 IEM. You're the one who notices repeated patterns, the ones heaven keeps sending until you obey. And yes, it can be isolating. Yes, it can feel like you're crazy. Yes, you've wondered if something's wrong with you. But the truth? You're not crazy. You're called. Your sensitivity is spiritual technology. Your dreams are downloads. Your tears are translations. Your insight is intercession. Your questions are the beginning of someone else's answers. You are a seer, a watcher, a witness of heaven in the midst of chaos. You don't just live on earth. You walk in two realms and bring the invisible into the visible. So if you've ever seen something coming before it came, If you've felt the shift no one else noticed, if you've cried over something you couldn't explain, if you've been called too spiritual more than once, then this final sign is yours. You see what others call crazy because your eyes are tuned to the kingdom. And that vision is not a burden, it's a weapon, a gift, a compass for a people who are still learning how to see. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5:8. The world wasn't ready, but heaven was. She stood at the edge of her porch, barefoot, bruised, but bright. Not the kind of bright that shines for show, the kind that comes from being set on fire and choosing not to go dim. For years, she questioned it all. The silence, its struggles, the delays, the knowing, the weight. She whispered into the dark, "Why do I feel things no one else sees? Why do I keep walking when everything in me is tired?" And now, the answer wasn't loud. It was settled. It had always been this. She was chosen, not to be famous, not to be flashy, but to be faithful, to carry truth in rooms where lies were loud, to love in places where pain had been planted, to rise when no one offered a hand, to believe, even when her breakthrough hadn't come yet. She wasn't being punished. She was being prepared, and so were you. If you've stayed this long, it's because something in your soul remembered what the world tried to make you forget. That your isolation was holy. That your strange path wasn't random, it was righteous. That every closed door protected your anointing. That every time you didn't give up, heaven recorded it. They didn't see your test, but God graded it. And he's not silent anymore. He's smiling. Because you passed. You passed by not quitting, by not getting bitter, by not betraying your calling just to feel comfortable. You passed the unseen exams. You passed the fire. You paused the silence. You passed without cheating and with your soul still intact. This world may not have understood you, but heaven did. And that's why everything's about to shift. Because when you walk in who you are, fully, unapologetically, you don't just survive. You lead. You ignite the dormant fires in others who've been quietly wondering if they too were chosen. Time to speak. Time to walk through the door that was always yours. You don't need to earn it. You just need to own it. You're not late. You're right on divine time. You're not empty. You're full of answers this world has been crying out for. You're not forgotten. You are the remnant, and you're about to be revealed. The mission is ready. The moment is ripe. And the world wasn't ready for you before. But heaven was. And now, everything you carried in silence is about to speak, louder than words ever could. She didn't hear thunder. She heard peace. And that peace had a name. Righteous. God doesn't call the perfect. He calls the willing. It's never too late to be used by him. The test was never to destroy you. It was to reveal you. If you've passed without cheating, drop a or say "I passed" in the comments. If this message found you in your quiet season, share it so another chosen one can remember who they are too. And if you believe this mission matters, let God lead you to support the journey.